And I want to talk to you about this COVID inquiry. Why do we not know how many people died as a result of lockdowns? Why do we not know how many people died directly due to COVID who didn't have underlying issues? Why do we not know where the virus came from? Was it a wet market in China or the Wuhan lab just 7 miles away from it? Why is the government still refusing to release the data on how many died or suffered life-changing injuries as a result of the jab?
This important interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your money and your identity. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code here to get ExpressVPN right now and save up to 73% on annual plans today. Right, let's get back into it.
Why do we not know if masks were actually effective or if they didn't work, as scientists said, before they flip-flopped and changed their minds on them? Why do we not know if social distancing had any impact on stopping the spread of the virus? Why do we not know if the government misled and lied to the public when it claimed that taking the vaccine stopped the spread of the virus, when we now know it didn't? Why do we not know if the government used a form of tyranny to force people to stay in their homes when fresh air was healthier for them? Why do we not know if censoring people who questioned the science was an act of serious authoritarianism? Why do we not know if COVID vaccine passports had any impact on stopping the spread after we spent millions developing it? Why do we not know if the WHO, the World Health Organization, was completely compromised by the Chinese government and led to us destroying our economies and public health to their gain? This absolutely disgraceful performance, also called the COVID inquiry, costing you £200 million put on by the government at our expense, should show you how far they're willing to go to lie to you and cover up their attempts to control and manipulate the public to conform. We will never know the answers to the questions I just posed because that utter circus of an inquiry didn't bother to investigate any of those claims. Instead, it decided to ensure it used debunked data, by the way, to reinforce the same establishment line about locking down earlier and harder. They didn't properly hold Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance accountable, men who have now been knighted, by the way, because they simply took them at their word and instead decided to point the finger at politicians who, unironically, were following the science and the advice of those men. This inquiry should expose to you how far our unelected establishment are willing to go to cover up their own corruption and failures. This was not an act of transparency, it was a cover-up of a litany of failures conducted and organised by the bureaucrats who, as we know, actually run Britain. The White House, by the way, has already debunked and answered many of these questions without spending millions of dollars on a cover-up inquiry. Here is the damning report they published almost a year ago on where COVID came from. Yet they boldly even go on to say this, by the way, things we already know: a lab-related incident involving gain-of-function research is the most likely origin of COVID-19. The virus possesses a biological characteristic that is not found in nature. The Wuhan Institute of Virology researchers were sick with COVID-like symptoms in the fall of 2019, months before COVID-19 was discovered at the wet market. So, was he right?
Why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? A lot of people say it's racist.
It's not racist at all, no, not at all. It comes from China.
It comes from China. That's right, it does, doesn't it? On the WHO, they definitely don't hold back in their report because they claim this. The WHO's response to the COVID-19 pandemic was an abject failure because it caved into pressure from the Chinese Communist Party and placed China's political interests ahead of its international duties. And on social distancing, well, they don't hold back here either. The 6 feet apart social distancing recommendation, which shut down schools and small businesses across the country, was arbitrary and not based on science. During closed-door testimony, this is their lead medical professional, by the way, Dr. Fauci testified that the guidance, quotes, sort of just appeared. Well, that sounds reliable, doesn't it? On masking up. They say there was no conclusive evidence that masks effectively protected Americans from COVID-19. Public health officials flip-flopped on the efficacy of masks without providing Americans scientific data, causing a massive uptick in public distrust. Oh, and they certainly did, didn't it? Public distrust massively waned after lockdown. And on lockdowns, they explicitly say this: prolonged lockdowns caused immeasurable harm to not only the American economy, but also to the mental health and physical health of Americans. And the most damning part of the Americans' report was this: public health officials often misled the American people through conflicting messaging, knee-jerk reactions, and a lack of transparency. Most egregiously, the federal government demonized alternative treatments and disfavored narratives such as the lab leak theory in a shameful effort to coerce and control the American people's health decisions. When those efforts failed, the Biden administration resorted to outright censorship, coercing and colluding with the world's largest social media companies to censor all COVID-19 related dissent. That is true. We know it because Facebook emails have been leaked, haven't they? They showed the engagement with the government agencies. How far does that go? You know, these are really serious accusations. And those are the words of a government with a spine, willing to hold themselves accountable for their failures. Frankly, Britain, you deserve better. We all gave up so much during those years, so much. Don't you think you're owed the truth at the bare minimum? Until we drain the swamp in Britain and hold these people accountable, these unelected bureaucrats, Britain will always be at threat of genuine tyranny and authoritarianism, not by politicians, but by the people who run those politicians, the unelected bureaucrats.
Every time you're online, your money and your identity are at risk. Scams now make up nearly 40% of all crime in the UK. That's thousands of attacks every single day. In Britain, someone has their identity stolen every 2 minutes, leaving victims with wrecked finances and years of stress. The threat is real, and you could be next. ExpressVPN is your shield against criminals. It locks down your devices, hiding your personal information and financial details from hackers, scammers, and anyone else looking to exploit you. So whether you're checking your bank, shopping, or just browsing, ExpressVPN makes you invisible to prying eyes trying to steal your money and your identity. ExpressVPN shields your data with military-grade AES 256 encryption. That's the same standard trusted by the US government to guard classified information. This is the highest level of online security you can get. So don't wait for disaster. Secure up to 14 devices at once and get powerful password protection. Real support is available 24/7 because cybercrime never sleeps. Save up to 73% on annual plans today. Every moment you hesitate is another moment you're exposed. Protect your money and protect your identity. Get ExpressVPN right now.
And I want to get the thoughts of my panel on this tonight. Reality TV and superstar AJ Pritchard, the editor-at-large at The Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and the journalist and broadcaster Nina Mishkov. What a lineup we've got tonight. Thank you all for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Nina, I'll start with you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of criticism about this inquiry. I'm glad we did something, but the outcome of it, so many questions I have there, and you know, many people who write it have these questions too. Why didn't we answer them?
Well, there may still be more to come out. You don't know yet. And I must say, Alex, I thought that your monologue was hinging on the paranoid. It really was. And honestly, why are we bothering with what America says? Because we should know what we're saying. You're banging on about what happened in America. It's not exactly the same thing here.
But the virus behaved the same way, Nina.
Exactly. First of all, I was going to say that anybody with a brain, with an ounce of logic, would have said from the beginning that it came from a lab in Wuhan.
Yes,
Why not? Why not?
I mean, it's 7 miles apart from the so-called wet market where it started, right?
So that's not been in a great debate. we're talking about lockdowns and what happened. I'll come to that in a minute. But we needed for our inquiry to find out who was responsible for making the decisions and how, as a country, we dealt with things, so that hopefully in the future, if this happens again, we know what to do. Unfortunately, what happened, this has shown that we had a government who was utterly useless at the time, run by a buffoon of a Prime Minister. That, if you remember, the first 5 Cobra meetings he missed because he was going through debates about how much settlement his divorced wife was going to get. He locked down late. We need to know that. Now, if you look at the actual best outcomes in the world, New Zealand, in terms of deaths, did best. They had only 20 deaths per 100,000. We had something like 340. Now, just a minute.
Yeah,
they locked down quickest and hardest. Now, what Hallett has said, that if we had locked down quicker, we might not have had to do further lockdowns. So if we'd done it hard and fast, and then got going after that.
But the data does show that lockdowns didn't actually change anything.
They did.
That's the problem. Actually, the
basic
data that from is it Neil Ferguson who put this out has been debunked several times.
The basic science is this. The virus was spread via the mouth to the nose, the mouth, the ears, the eyes.
Like a normal cold, yes.
Like a normal cold. So to prevent people from doing that, you had to separate people.
But then we put them all in the house together.
Yeah, well,
Go on, Charlotte. No, let's Charlotte come in. Come on. Yeah,
well, I would just say, first of all, New Zealand's a very spread out place, it's fair to say. Obviously, the UK is a bit more cramped, especially in London. Now, in terms of it being a cold, we all know how to avoid a cold. We avoid each other. If somebody's got a cold, you don't go to the pub with them and give them a big hug and a kiss on the cheek. Now, we could have just told people, look, there's a virus going around, keep your distance. Just like a normal cold, try and avoid each other. We didn't actually have to lock down. And the modelling that was behind this...
The thing is that the difference is, Charlotte, that colds do not end in death, whereas COVID did.
But COVID deaths accounted for, was it?
I think when it comes down
go on, AJ.
Statistically, when it talks about, obviously, the common cold does kill tens of thousands of people each year.
Oh, nonsense.
Statistically, when you talk about it, like, I think one thing for me, like, my grandma broke a hip. She was in hospital from Friday to Sunday. The reason why she died is because they put her in a room with a person with COVID, and then that's kind of deaths. Statistically, her death was wrote down as COVID.
Yes.
Like, she broke a hip. She was 93 years old. She had dementia. That wasn't wrote down. The wrote down was she died of COVID. I think statistically, that's the painful thing. We have an inquiry to go through this. We're a country. If we're going to lock down all domestic flights, we can run for a certain amount of months, keep people open. The mental health crisis afterwards. Our industry, like, what was it? Kind of rethink, reskill, reboot, like, lose your industry. And I think this for a country and a youth moving forward.
But if we had a short lockdown, a short, sharp lockdown, then we could have opened up much, and it would have been...
It never would have ended, Nina. They were obsessed with it. Keir Starmer wanted more lockdowns, and once the scientists took control, once the establishment behind the politicians had taken over, which they did, even Boris Johnson's private memoirs and his text messages prove, actually, he didn't really want to do this. I hold him accountable, by the way, because he should have stood by those guns. Sweden was the other country that did exceptionally well, and they didn't do lockdowns. This is
Can I just debunk the whole Swedish thing?
Go on.
You said New Zealand's a very, rural country and a lot of space. Sweden has a population of 10 million. Stockholm is a population of 2 million. They ended up with deaths per 100,000 of about 230,000 per 100,000, whereas we are only about 340. So not that far behind us. So they didn't escape. They did not escape. And besides which, they're a much healthier population than we are.
Okay.
One thing I would say that the modelling that says that 23,000 people would have died, they did predict the same with Sweden, and then during the pandemic, and then what happened was only 6,000 people died. Now, to me, that just says this modelling is flawed. The groupthink was hysterical. And, really not that many people would have died. I really don't believe this figure that's come out of the report.
But the final total we give is about 230,000 ultimately.
Nina, hang on, let me just put this to you, because AJ made a really good point earlier on. People who are in hospital who happen to have either COVID 30 days prior or caught it while they're at hospital were technically COVID deaths. This is a massively exaggerated number, this number we're constantly told. And what I'm asking, and what this inquiry should have done for £200 million, is answer some of the most basic questions. All they've said is, we should have locked down more. Well, actually,
they didn't say that.
Well, they did. That's exactly, they said we locked down earlier. We should have done
earlier, yes, earlier and the shortest period of time.
How can they make that conclusion, by the way? How can they make that conclusion if we don't know how many people died as a result of lockdowns? I can guarantee you the number of people who died because of cancer treatment being missed, and all these other things massively exceeds the amount of people that died during COVID.
I understand that, but without lockdowns, more people would have died. If the modelling is slightly flawed, if it wasn't 23,000, maybe it was 7,000. All I know is that final week there was the Cheltenham races, there was a rock concert, and there was a football match. Are you telling me that people went to that and didn't die?
Final word to you, AJ.
I think for me, it's one thing. It's like we should be learning from this situation. How do we use this in the future? It's not about, OK, the inquiry's happened, but if this was to happen again, how do we deal with it? And that's what should be spoken about clearly and precisely, and that hasn't been done with this.
I feel we've learned nothing. That's what's so depressing about this report.
That's scary.
Like
200 million.
We should have locked down.
We have learned quite a lot.
Just one very quick thing for Alex's point. They didn't ask one very basic question, which you were calling for, which is they didn't actually ask what would have happened if we didn't lock down.
Exactly.
Really, they asked everything but that.
Yeah, I totally... Nina, I'm sorry, I've got to leave it there.